So, hi, how are you guys? I know that you guys all have children at Sunset Elementary, which is great. I attended West Lab, but then I attended the gifted program from West Lab was shipped over from different schools to Sunset when I was young, and so I got to go to like I think it was Tuesday, Thursday. We went over to Sunset, so I'm familiar with the school and I've been in the area for a long time, so I'm familiar with the school, and there's a lot of it's a pretty good school still. I've continued to hear great things about it, so I hope you guys are happy there. But what we came to discuss is, what's next is middle school. Unfortunately, Sunset doesn't go through 12th grade, does it? Right, and so I'm here to answer some of your questions about middle school and the application process, and we can talk about private schools and charter schools and public schools. And there's a lot of things to consider with these questions, and some of you guys might be in the thick of that decision making process already, and that's but some of you might just be starting, and so I'm here to sort of answer some of your questions, and we're getting a few people joining us here at this moment. Hi, Marisol, how are you? Hi, Laura. Hi, Oksana. How are you? And Roberto. Okay. So, you know, mainly I'm here to answer your questions. Hi, I'm Josh Dallenberg, and so I've been an educator here in South Florida for almost 30 years, and I taught at Ransom for 16. And so I know a lot about. I've got three boys of my own, and they went to some private schools and some public schools, and one is still a junior at Gables High, where my wife works. And so I'm from down here, and I know a lot about some of the schools, and I consult with families about where they should send their kids to school. And I have a little tutoring company that helps families with schoolwork and transitioning into different schools. But basically, I'm here to answer your questions. So, I've got a presentation plan, but I would rather, answer your questions. So go ahead and speak up. You can put something in the chat. You can keep yourself on mute, which most of you have, but you can also like unmute yourself and like ask a question. So, what are some of the things that you guys are interested in learning about today? I'm glad to have such a nice attendance, but like, what are some of the things that you guys want to talk about? Hi, Carla. Okay, I'm gonna start it. Okay, I'm gonna do it. Okay, no problem. Okay, okay, I will go through it, but I just want to make it very interactive. I want you guys to, to feel that I used your time wisely and answered any questions you have. So, I plan on saying things, but I don't know what you guys want to know about. So, just stop me if there's anything that I'm not covering. How about that? Okay, we'll make it an interactive classroom session. Okay, so hi, I'm Josh. Um, and so I did go to, let's see, Plymouth Preschool, West Lab, Ponce, briefly to St. Thomas for 1 year, Trinity before there was Palmer Trinity, and then I went to Ponce and Gables, um, and then I went away to school briefly, and I came back, and as a 22-year-old, became a school teacher in Homestead, then Gables High, and then Ransom Everglades for 16 years. So I've been tutoring this admissions test, SSAT, ISEE, for over a decade since my 22-year-old was in fifth grade. So I had a fifth grader. And then I had another fifth grader a year later, and then I have a now 11th grader, a 22-year-old, and a 20-year-old boy, all boys. So just feel free to uh, tell people about me when they're moving to Miami and they need someone to tell them about the schools. But even the people from Miami that have been here a while sometimes need help with the schools, which is why I'm meeting with you guys today. So some of the things I hear myself saying over and over again is school is not about where you get into, but it's about what you do when you get there. So you can fail out of Harvard, but you can also light the world on fire from Miami-Dade. But we're not talking about college admissions. We're talking about middle school. But there's still that equivalency there is, once you enter sixth grade, you're going to have to meet new kids. You're going to have to meet new teachers. You're going to have to make you know, my mom always said, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So it's what you do in middle school and how you organize yourself and the activities and the friends that you meet that are going to set the table for high school. Okay. And sometimes you'll be applying to a school that has a middle school and combined high school. We want all the kids to have the right fit. So every school is not right for every child, and every child is not right for every school. So the other thing I would encourage you guys to do is to keep a very open mind during the admissions process. So basically, you may think you know where you want your child to go to school, but I would ask you to keep an open mind about several schools and not put all your eggs in one basket. So, um, again, a lot of what I do is consulting and tutoring for private schools, but public schools. So this is definitely the private schools. This slide, but with the public schools, it's either your district or your or the lottery system, and there might be an application process if it's an art school as well. But schools basically are going to look at your grades, your scores on admissions tests, teacher recommendations. They might interview the child. They usually will interview the child and sometimes the parents. And then there'll also be an essay component, sometimes definitely by the child and sometimes by the parents as well. Okay, welcome to you all that are coming in a few minutes later. Okay, and so we want to talk about private schools versus public schools. And of course, there's magnet schools, programs within the public schools, and there's charter schools. Okay, so I'm going to maybe mute. If you think there's background noise in your house, then maybe you want to mute yourself. Let's see. And then, some people are not really sure what these different things are. So obviously, your public schools are the schools. Everyone's entitled to a free K through 12 education. And it ought to be an excellent K through 12 education. Unfortunately, our state has not always invested the maximum amount of resources into those public schools, and so there are some excellent public schools, and there's some ones that are lacking, probably, and there's a difference of opinions of which schools are which. But the everyone's entitled to a public school. So if you live in Coral Gables, you might be entitled to go to Ponce or Carver and then for high school, Coral Gables High. Again, where I attended and taught briefly, and also my wife teaches there. So they've got an IB program. That's a great place to land. You can think about this backwards, right? Where not where do you want your child to go to college, but also where do you want your child to go to high school? And I think that the middle school decision, in other words, going from fifth grade to sixth grade, is a separate decision than that of going to from eighth to ninth. So when you're choosing your middle school, you may be choosing your high school too. And if your child lands at a school that definitely goes all the way through 12th grade and they're well adjusted, they're thriving, they've got good friends, they've got good grades, they're happy, they're content, I would never argue for you to switch that. But if something wasn't right academically or socially, or it wasn't the right environment for them, or the high school wasn't the right environment, I think that there's two separate decisions. It's not uncommon for a child to go to one elementary school, one middle school, and one high school. And then obviously you might start thinking about what kind of college they want to go to. But to me, it's not too early for that, but it's not the right time to be thinking about that necessarily, because they can go to an excellent school from any of the high schools in South Florida, okay, depending on what they do once they get there. So a magnet program is a public program that's supposed to attract a population that wouldn't ordinarily do that. So out of their district. So Mast, for instance, is a magnet school, but it's a public school and it's absolutely free with our tax dollars. Okay, we all pay taxes and they go towards public schools and roads and police officers and fire departments, but we're all entitled to send our kids to public schools. And I definitely think it's a great option. I'm a big supporter of public schools. Mainly, I attended public schools and I started out as a public school teacher. And what makes excellent public schools, or what actually makes any great school, in my opinion, as an educator, is involved parents. And I know you guys know that at because you have a very active PTA at Sunset. So a magnet program might be an arts program, but that is a public school. Okay, a charter school gets public funding and but is not a public school, but you go there for free. You use your tuition credit from the state. FTE dollars are converted over, and they go to that school. But it is not. They have some oversight by the public school board, and they have some things that they don't have to do, like they don't have to pay their teachers this much or that much, and they don't have to necessarily have them certified, and they run by slightly different rules, the charter school programs. But there are some excellent charter schools, and there are some probably pretty terrible public charter schools. But I think you can say that about public schools, charter schools, or charter schools. You know, there's good and there's bad and there's in between. And then what's the right fit for your family might be different for a different family. So the nice thing about the electronic age that our children are living in, at least one advantage, there's some disadvantages, is that they don't have to lose their friends from Sunset Elementary just because they go to spread like the wind and go to different middle schools. If they want to keep those friendships going, they're certainly going to have some ways to communicate with their friends and keep those friendships going. Okay, so my sons went to Coconut Grove Elementary, and they kept some of those friendships going, even that they did not go to the same middle school. So there are some pros and cons. The private schools probably have nicer facilities, better after school programs. You know, there's a disadvantage of like the tuition cost. Obviously, the cost is a big thing. Some of the schools are up to $40,000 a year, which sounds more like a private college tuition. And that's, you know, plus field trips, plus other stuff, uniforms. And so that's a hefty cost when you add it all up for 3 years of middle school or 7 years of middle school and high school. It adds up quite a bit. So there's plenty of families that want to spend that money at those private schools, but there's plenty of people who can think of other creative ways to spend that money, you know, for either for themselves or for their family. You can take a lot of trips and afford a lot of after school programs, but you're going to get smaller class sizes in private schools. There's excellent teachers at both schools, and there's some mediocre teachers at both, at all kinds of schools. So there's no perfect school that has a perfect faculty and a perfect student body and a perfect administration. So knowing that, we move forward. Okay. Any questions on the difference between these types of schools? All right. So this is what I would suggest. I mean, how many of you guys are fourth grade families? You know, like you have fourth graders. Maybe you can put a thumbs up on your Zoom if you can do a thumbs up. Okay. So how many are one? Okay. I'm seeing Laura is okay, and Diego have fourth graders. So I'm going to talk to you guys about what you guys should be doing now. And you know, as the father of 20 and 20-year-old, 22-year-old and a 16-year-old, you know, you should keep them passionate and curious. This is for all kids. I didn't put this in a slide, but you should keep the curiosity driving their education. Grades matter, and we tell the kids grades matter, but No one at the beginning of this presentation asked me what my GPA was, and I'm likely not to get that question or test scores. They're going to ask me questions about my knowledge with the schools, you guys, and you're going to listen to me without knowing my GPA. But keeping the curiosity driving and keeping your education relevant. So there's a Mark Twain quote that I like that says like, "Don't let schooling interfere with your education." So, you know, you, your child is in charge of their education. You are there to help them with their education, but their education doesn't just mean school. School's not the only source of education. Families are the biggest source of education, especially with language development and travel and worldliness. But keep your kids passionate, keep them curious, keep them reading. So make sure that your child or your son or daughter is addicted to reading. This is one of the only good addictions in the world, but it will certainly help with all their schoolwork and test taking. So make sure your child embraces the growth mindset. So you want to keep them curious, and if they have to use electronics, you want them to be limited, but also you want them to be somewhat educational. So there's good ways to use electronics and bad ways, or less useful ways, I should say. Um, you should speak up to your children. Not that any of you guys speak down to your children, but like if if you could just try to talk to them as if they have master's degrees, that would be the best way, because if they hear you say these words a bunch of times, they're going to pick up on those words. So that's a good strategy for all people. Don't talk down to your children. They will understand a lot through context. Okay. Um, Set up a time to talk more. I don't know why I wrote that. I don't. I think I transitioned from the other side. Uh, Set up a time to talk as a family, I think, is what I meant to say. And start talking about schools, and then get started. I apologize. I think I borrowed that from another slide. So this is what that's a little embarrassing. I changed that yesterday. My bad. Okay. Welcome, Adrian. Oops. Now, what should fifth grade families do now? Well, you should visit the school's websites and see the requirements for admissions. And I've got a document that I can send you that can give you a head start on that if you'd like. And then you should start visiting schools. The open house season is now. Sometimes it's virtual and sometimes it's in person. It's really nice that in the middle of or the beginning of the workday, you guys could join me at 9 o'clock, via Zoom. That's super convenient. But being on campus, I think there's really no substitute. And many schools are accepting tours in small numbers. So you should start making a short list after a family meeting, of which schools you're interested in. Don't make it a list of one. And then you ought to apply. The applications are usually open at this time of year. It's October, and this is the admission season, and it's going to wrap up in December or January, and you'll get some selections in March. Now, I'm again talking about private schools. The charter school application, you should also get started on, and I think you can apply for not charter schools. I meant the magnet school application. It's one application for I think 3 schools, and I got to check the date for that, but I have a little link to it. And then if you need help from someone like me, you ought to get it for your child, because sometimes that help goes a long way. So again, I plan in my presentation before I go further to answer any questions you have. So I'm really going to insist that I get a couple questions before I go for it. I'm not used to teaching with such silence. There's got to be a question that you guys have. Roberto? Nobody has a question about anything. Mainly, this is supposed to be like a questions and answers session. So, um, does someone have a question about public schools, private schools, charter schools? Oh, okay. Let me look at it. Need my glasses. Thank you. Okay. That's a fine way. Okay. Okay. I no, there's a correction. So applications are for 5 schools at Magnet. So thank you very much for that. Um, and then also, how do you choose the right school for your child? Parameters to look for. So again, I think what's going to happen is that you're open at the open houses, even when you go to the websites, just like when you choose anything, there's going to be certain things that are important to you. Okay, religion is one. If you want to go to a religious school, if you want your child to go to a religious school, that's very different than if you want to make sure they don't go to religious school. So some schools have religious affiliations, and then obviously many schools don't. Public schools don't. And but there's some private schools do. There's some Christian schools, and in the area there's, and then which denomination. So that's certainly one of them. Um, some people say I want to go to this school for sports. Well, almost every school has sports. But at the same time, which sport that might guide your family because that might be really important to your family. Um, Location might be important. You might not want your child to be in traffic for a long time, although like Palmer Training is pretty far south. But my sister sent my niece there, and she loved getting on the bus and doing her homework and hanging out with friends in the morning. It didn't seem to bother her very much, but we have things that we value as a family. Your child values. If your child has a terrific talent, I don't think it's too late for you to chase the right program for that talent. Now, if they've got an interest in chess, there's no schools for chess. I don't, not that I know of. But if there's a program at a school, like especially an arts program, if they're really love dance or drama and they can go to a school where they get to do that a lot, I think that I think that's great. But some of those need an application process. So certainly those are things to consider. So I don't know if they're really parameters. There's obviously budget for us to consider as well. So I'm not sure, Marisol, did I answer your question? You should be looking for the school saying the right things about the right topics for your family. So what decision I might make or someone else might make for their family is not necessarily um, what your family is looking for in a school and in an educational partner, because schools really should be partners with their parents in the child's education. That's at least what I think they should be doing, and the parents have to hold those schools to account for that. Okay. Any other questions? You can put them in the chat, but someone's going to have to remind me that they're in the chat. I did want to break from my presentation quickly to show you a document, and I certainly would like, and I'm going to give you a what is it called? I'm going to give you a little contact card for myself so that you can get access to call me or email me. But there's a document I made for some consulting parents uh, from Columbia. They are asking me which schools their son should apply to, and so my assistant and I made this little PDF. And yes. Oh, okay. Thank you. I no, I can't see that little. Okay. Does your child have a better chance of securing a scholarship in private schools into middle school or high school? You know, um, Adrian, that's a good question. For scholarship money for the private schools, it's usually need based. It's usually need based. So you really want to look at your income. I don't know what level of income, $100,000, like family income. They're going to ask for your tax returns actually. So you get a high score, you have A's. Lots of kids have A's, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get a scholarship based on merit. So it's not like college in that regard. The top students don't necessarily get a scholarship. It's the need based families that get scholarships. So if your family makes under whatever level of income, they might get 10%. They might get 50%, they might get 100% assistance and aid. So almost every private school, and to my knowledge, it doesn't drastically differ between middle school and high school. So, for instance, where I taught for a long time, it was Ransom Everglades. The way to get into Ransom Everglades is in fifth grade, is in sixth grade. There's 160 slots there, and then every other year there's 0 slots or 2 slots or 3 slots, except for ninth grade. There's like 12 to 20 spots because some people leave and go to a different high school, and so on and so forth. So this is not a complete list. Um, this is some of the dates for SSAT, real test, and that's a test that gets you into ransom and stuff like that. But here's some deadlines, and here's some schools that I was advising this Columbia family from. And then I made a thing like this, a one pager for Ransom and for Gulliver and for Palmer and for Ponce. Now there's no admissions director at Ponce, right? For Carver, and these are elementary schools: St. Stephen's, St. Philip, St. Thomas, Coconut Grove Elementary. And then this is the thing on the magnet schools. So, if you want me to email you this document, or if you just want to get on my, mailing list of other information that I'm putting out about schools, then you can just leave your email in the chat, and if you want this particular document, you should say so. But if you want me to be able to contact you via email, why don't you leave your email in the chat? But I can definitely text you. I can definitely email you this document later if it's any interest to you, or I can also give you a copy of the PowerPoint if that's any help to you guys. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, you're like my MC. Thank you. Behavioral issues. Okay. What do you find out about behavioral issues? So there's some private schools that are not very well equipped to handle learning disabilities, and there's not a very high tolerance for some of the behavioral issues. But can you tell me a little bit more what you meant by behavioral issues in private schools, Oksana? All high schools have drugs. I Okay. There's all every not every middle school doesn't have drugs, but there's somewhat at every middle school who has experimented with alcohol or e-cigarettes, or there's some eighth graders that have started to experiment. I mean, that's the age that happens, and I'm not excusing it, but that's not the school's fault necessarily. It's a sign of the times. You're not going to get a totally drug-free student population, 6th through 8th grade, I think, at any South Florida school. But okay, so obviously the school that I know best is Ransom because I taught there for 16 years. If you if your child was caught, if your child had an incident where they had alcohol or drugs at the high school level, or whatever, if it was on campus, it was a totally different deal. If you brought it on campus, there was very little tolerance or many second chances. But if it's at home or not regarding dealing with the school or a school, uh, it, school event, then they didn't necessarily get in your business too much. But at the same time, if your family was serving alcohol at a party to underage people, then they had it in their contract that they would kick your child out of that school. That's the way Ransom handled it. So I'm not that familiar. So there's not a place that I know that tracks bullying incidents, and but most schools I know are on top. When they do hear about it, they try to deal with bullying directly. ever since Columbine, right? Like so there's not much tolerance at any school that I know of bullying, but drug and alcohol, most schools try to work with the families to try to get the kids the support that they need if there's an addiction problem, but they're not like the police in that regard. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. So are you talking about college counseling? So there's a couple different types of counselors at schools, right? And so the private schools probably they do it better than the public schools because that's some of the things that your tuition dollars are doing. So, for instance, there's academic counselors at a lot of private schools. Your child is starting to go down academically. They've got an advisor system, and then they've got someone that can sort of help them, and they're teaching study skills within some of their electives or classes and stuff like that. And there's just but there are counselors at public schools too, but maybe not as many. And they just have more students per counselor. When you get to high school, most of the private schools do have college counselors. So at Ransom, I think there's about a staff of five. Yet plenty of parents still use consultants. I don't do college consult. I don't give anyone advice where they should send their child to go to college except for friends. But I don't have that business. I have SAT and ACT, tutors, but I don't, and college people, for essays, but I don't have, I don't charge a lot of money to, hey, you should go to Harvard and you should go to FSU. I don't do that. That's not part of my business. But there's plenty of people that do, and plenty of private school families hire those people on the side because they're not happy with the staff, or the staff doesn't have as much time as they want for their particular child and their vision. But yes, they do have a plan. They engage with ninth graders and 10th graders, but not as much as 11th and 12th graders, right? Because they're putting the final touches on that. So I've heard people say that they're unhappy, even though they've got large staffs compared to like Gables High had one counselor that was paid for half of a day for all their college counseling. So I would definitely, when you get to ninth grade, have a little bit of a plan about looking at schools, and really try to make your child stand out in terms of their involvement, because they can join 50 clubs, but are they ever an officer of one of them? That's really what some of the colleges are looking for, is some way for your child to tell their story about who they are, to make them stand out. That's talking about ninth through 12th grade. Yes, sir. Thank you. I'd like to answer it all. I cannot make a blanket statement like there's this educational gap. There's definitely some kids like, to me, it's about what the kids are reading on their own, not necessarily what they're being asked to read by their teachers. Obviously, math is the easiest one to say. Well, when are you entering algebra? Well, if this kid is entering algebra a year earlier, they're going to get a chance to take a higher level, later on. So definitely with math, you can sort of quantify it. When do you start algebra? Then you're allowed to take geometry, algebra two, pre-cal and calculus, trigonometry. I mean, so if you don't start early enough, you can never get to that level of rigor. But if your child is not getting algebra, then that's not a good time to start them. And so yes, there's some gap of some schools. But I cannot make a blanket statement that private schools are all better and public schools are all lower. But there are some private schools and some kids at private schools that might be higher. But obviously, there's so many ways to study on your own. But I cannot say that there's a across the board gap between public schools and private schools. I think it would have to depend on the school and the child, because remember, at every school, let's take high school for an example, there's advanced placement, which is basically college credit. Now, I would not tell your ninth or 10th, 11th, 12th grader to take an AP in something that they're not super interested in, because not only is it college credit and college work, but they're now meeting 5 days a week. Almost no college class meets 5 days a week. They meet 2 or 3. So you're doing 5 days a week and in a college course, and then some kids are taking 5 APs. Well, that's a full college load, and college does not take from 7 a.m. to 2:30. So to me, it's sort of crazy, the schedule and the rigor that some of these kids are taking in high school. It's great, I think, but also it's very challenging and it's very competitive. I understand that, but what's your? Did I answer that question? I can't say that there's one thing. What was your other question? I think that the admissions office is pretty small. So if you move into town and like, well, why didn't you apply in sixth grade? Well, I applied in sixth grade, but I got in. I just thought that this other middle school was fine. I think that I think the admissions staff is likely to be the same in a few years, or have some of the same people, and they might remember that you applied. Absolutely. And so it's not financial aid. Financial aid is usually done separately. So you file your tax returns each year. And so this year your tax return was this, and now this year you're entitled to this much aid. But those are separate decisions usually. But just in terms of, if you decline a school and then try to come three, well, while you're declining the school, you're not even going to the school, right? But then you come back 3 years later and say, now I want to go to the school. They totally can remember that, I think. I mean, they could be offended. I mean, it's possible. I don't know in their head. I meet with some admissions officers sometimes, but I don't get to that level. But I think that they can be offended that why didn't you come here in sixth grade? They're the sales department of their school. They're trying to sell the school to the families, and they're trying to convert, and they love that they are popular or have a lot of applications per spot, right? That's what, that's their success in their business, right? That's their industry. Um, okay, yeah, no problem. So just let me know, interrupt me if there's any. I'll just finish this quickly. There are some schools that you might need to get into a private school. Palmer Trinity dropped their test requirement because of, well, they were never really into it that much. Carrollton accepts both of these tests. Gulliver does accept both. Ransom only accepts the SSAT. Berlin takes the ISCC on campus in December. Um, October is now. Like, we're in October, so this is the time to go to open houses. Most of the applications are due in late December, and then you ought to know your admissions decision. Again, this is private school admissions timeline, so that which I know a little more about than the other ones. So I know some of you guys are considering privates. That's why I'm here to answer your question. This is what I suggest for the test, which is we pack the content in early and then the strategies closer to the test. But right now, if you were to start this process, it's like you need to do it all right now. The fourth graders have a lot more time, the fourth grade families, so you can just sort of start in the spring or the summer. Anytime before the fall is, to me, an early start. But waiting till this time is a little bit late. Um, yes, sir. No, I don't mind. I would prefer. Well, there's a couple different ones for the private for the. So this is the difference between these two tests. They both have synonyms: reading comprehension, math, and an essay, but the ISE has a little bit different. So they're basically similar tests. These two, so I would suggest you only prep for one of the tests if possible, if you're going to have to. But I made this graphic just to help you understand the differences between those tests. Um, and then there's an HSPT, which is for Catholic schools. Although, like I said, Berlin uses that, and Carrollton, they don't use that, but schools like Lourdes and stuff use that. But there's differences to each test. But the thing is, like, these tests are not like the other tests that kids have taken sometimes, and so that's why tutoring sort of helps sometimes. I mean, usually it does help quite a bit. Another question? I don't care. No, they'll jump in. We made the rules clear, right? Right. That's true. If well, if you have one child versus you have seven children, they know there's a formula that they use. I mean, seven children is a lot more expensive. I mean, that hurts just to even talk about, right? So children are expensive, and they know that, and so they ask you, what's your mortgage and how much did you go on vacation? Like they ask you like a pretty big series of financial questions, and where your money is tied up and stuff like that. So as a faculty member, I got free tuition for every year that I was at Ransom, that my kids were there. I sent two for 7 years, and I sent one to the middle school for 3 years. And that's 3 years ago. When I left, I went to Gables when we decided that Gables was the better school for him because, Ransom gets this reputation of being a pressure cooker, but most of that's from the high school. It's not really from the middle school, in my opinion. And we could talk about individual schools and their reputations. The only thing is, I would wish that everyone talks to Ransom parents about Ransom and Gulliver about Gulliver and Carver with Carver and so on and so forth. I don't want you to talk to a Palmer Trinity parent about Ransom or vice versa or something like that. Yes, yes, we can. We can, and I can tell you my impressions, and I'll tell you when I visited the school and when I haven't, and what I know about it and what I don't, or and I'll tell you my impressions of each school. So let's do that. But to answer your question, is it's a complicated formula, Roberto, and mainly it has to do with the size of your family and your income. And so I don't know where that cutoff is. You might ask the admissions staff in an email or a phone call, say, "Look, I made this last year." You're going to find that out anyway when you know, there's usually a person that handles that financial aid part, and you might just ask them direct questions. And the worst they could do is say, "Well, we don't disclose that," or "We don't know. It depends." But there is a lot of form. There is a lot, and then again, you could get 10% help. You can get 100% help, or you can get 0% help. So obviously, the families that do better financially are not offered any financial aid because it's used for need based, um, at least at every school that I'm aware. So, um, Ransom, obviously, let's start there. That's where I worked for 16 years. I had a great experience there, great faculty and great kids, and they take the best test scores and they take the best grades, and they're centrally located and they have a great reputation for academic rigor. The thing is, I would use two questions because a lot of my tutoring students want a lot of my families that I tutor are like Ransom or bust. They only want Ransom because of its reputation. And And I said, well, Ransom might not be the right school for your child. Let's ask him a couple questions. Okay. And I asked the child, hey, do you like to know stuff? And they're like, yeah, I love to know stuff. And then they're like, well, do you like to work hard? And like, oh yeah, I don't like to work that hard. Working hard? Nah, no, that's not me. Well, I'm looking for two yeses that are sort of quick. And I'm like, then Ransom might be the right school for you. Now, every child at Ransom, every student at Ransom is not brilliant and or well organized or finished product. None of us are finished products anyway, right? But basically, the high school is the real pressure cooker in terms of the academic and the competition. Now, some of those kids fit in right. I sent my kids there really not knowing and thinking, well, they'll just catch on with all these others. My kids are bright, but they don't like to work hard necessarily. And so, which, for a lot of middle school, fifth grade boys is just very average. Or men in general, like we don't love to work hard. We like to find shortcuts, and we don't like to show our math work. We like to come up with the answer in our head. I mean, that's what we do sometimes. And so, and some young ladies like to do that too. But that Ransom's not filled with just one type of a child, but they do accept high test scores, high grades, and then there's also they get a lot of parents who went to Ransom, alumni that are sending their kids, and all the schools try to keep the siblings together if possible. So if you're working with your oldest child right now, if you've got a fourth grader or a fifth grader plus someone who's in third, second, kindergarten, whatever, then getting them one into the school. But then again, with siblings, just because one child should go to this school doesn't mean that other child should go to that school. Now, remember, you got two Coconut Grove campuses. I'm pointing because I'm in the Grove right now. And so the middle school near at my house over here by Kennedy, by Monty's and Bayshore, and then the upper school is on Main Highway in the other part of the Grove, closer to downtown. Okay. Now, going from there and ask me any question. I mean, yeah, I loved Ransom Middle School. I thought it was challenging for the kids and challenging for the teachers and very smart parents and stuff like that. So I recommend it highly still, especially if you've got the right child for that. And if they can get in, if they can do well enough on this test to get in, then they might actually fit. But if they're in academic trouble by the end of seventh grade or beginning of eighth, I totally recommend not sending to the high school. It's two different decisions, and it's two different campuses, and it's two different fields of the faculty and the campus. So the upper school is on the bay, and it's beautiful and whatnot. Let's go from there to Gulliver. Okay, Gulliver is a K through 12, but they have significant chances to get in sixth grade. Okay, because they increase their middle school population from elementary, so there's plenty of spaces to get in right now. They do have a scholarship that's merit based. I wanted to talk about this. One of my students got this one time. The top 5 SSAT scores get a merit based scholarship of $10,000 for every year that you're in school there. One of my families got this one time, which means $70,000 off their 7 years of tuition. The brother went for it, same tutor, which is me, and he did not get it. So it's not easy to get. I think it was like a 95% that he got. A really smart student. I think he's a 10th grade basketball player right now. Anyway, he got it one time, but they give that away as a way to not lose their top students. And so Gulliver is going to say that they've got something for everyone, and they do, because they have IB program even at the middle school. They've got this new Edge program that I'm trying to learn about, and they'll start placing your child not just in math or language, but in social studies and English and different things. So there's different levels at the middle school. There's IB, there's honors, there's regular, and they even serve children with learning disabilities quite well because they have a separate campus. I think it's called the Montgomery campus. It's near Palmetto High School, and they have a separate campus that if you're really low in math or reading, you can go to that campus in the morning and come back to the regular campus off Old Cutler, and you can get the help you need. I mean, they help kids with moderate to severe learning disabilities. So it's a good way to get mainstreamed and get the help you need if you've got a child that has that. My wife is a special education teacher at Gables, and so that's one of the private schools that does handle those situations well. But a lot of schools don't handle it well if you've got a special situation like that. Like ADD, I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. Every school has kids that have the ADD, and they may or may not take medicine. But the other more severe things or less common things, some of the private schools don't handle that well. And so Carrollton is in the Grove, got a great reputation. It's um, you know, girls only, so any boys applying, they might find their results to be negative. They're not going to get in. And so I visited before COVID, I was visiting a lot of schools. My timing was impeccable with COVID, with like leaving the schools. I haven't ever had to teach with COVID. I've been tutoring online for a long time, but and I and but I haven't had to do that, you know, dual modality with my students, which is great. Anyway, it's got a great reputation. It's hard to get into because there's not very many spots, but a few people do leave in sixth grade, go elsewhere, and so there are some spots for Carrollton. And I was sort of drinking the Kool-Aid because guess who the science, guess who the student council president is going to be? It's going to be a girl. Guess who's going to be the treasurer of the math club? It's going to be a girl. So like, there's a lot of science and math women empowerment at that school. Robotics, the whole robotics club and math club are going to be filled with girls. So when girls need encouragement to find the STEM and the math and engineering jobs, which they and if you've got a young lady and you can get them involved in math and computing and coding and engineering and robotics, they will go to an engineering school and have a great career, because those engineering schools are still 70 or 80% men, maybe 90. And so they're really looking for those girls that have an interest in math and science. And that's a great way to go, I think. Um, Palmer Trinity, again, my niece went there, and she loved it. She loved it. It has a reputation of being like a friendlier school. They didn't care that much about test scores, even when they had tests. They're very international. They like to. All the schools are international, by the way, uh, but they actually take trips, and they've got a beautiful campus. They got a new chapel down there, and it's just a very friendly environment. They've got all their K through, like Gulliver's got two campuses, Ransom's got two campuses, Palmer Trinity has one campus, and it's huge. But it is a far drive. So you have to consider that, but definitely go down there and look at it. Let's talk about Carver. Carver, I think you guys have a special way to get into Carver through school of choice, right? Sunset is a natural progression to Carver. And obviously, they have the Spanish program, which is very popular, but I also think they have a German program that's less popular. So if your child already knows Spanish pretty well, they might. I have a science teacher friend of mine at Ransom who learned German through going to Carver. And he certainly can use Spanish more than German in South Florida, but he learned another language, and with language acquisition, the earlier the better, right? So I like that it's a language program. I like that it's close by, but they don't really have those after school facility. I mean, the sports facilities in the same way. So I know a bunch of kids that went through the Carver volleyball program, but it wasn't really that impressive. But and the schools, the class size again is going to be the major difference, and some of the way that the classroom looks. But for the price, it's certainly, if you weren't sure which one is the better school, Carver or Gulliver, or Carver or Ransom, if you weren't sure what is the better school for period, or the better for your child, then there's a $40,000 price tag difference. So I'm not trying to discourage or encourage anyone in any way, but obviously price for the product is something you can consider. Um, all Riviera. Okay, so I have been to Riviera. I visited Riviera. I had an Italian family I was consulting for, and he was coming. He got into Riviera and Gulliver in the middle of seventh grade. Okay, now this is before COVID, and a lot of New Yorkers are moving down, and obviously, people are always moving to South Florida. So all these schools are tightening up their admissions, I think. But Riviera, I like. The guy that started it is a Ransom grad, and and it's sort of a smaller school on a smaller footprint, but they have some nice new facilities. Is sort of a, I mean, it's not that new. But it's their campus is new, right? They used to be behind Whip and Dip, which is where their elementary school is, and now this bigger school is out there, sort of south of Dayland, and so I like it. Um, some people think it's not got the same academic challenge, but I'm just saying the top students. Actually, I have two of my best tutors work there and are excellent. But one teaches English and one teaches math there, and so I don't know it as well, and I haven't sent as many of my families. I don't know it as well as those other schools, but it's a little smaller, and some people think it's not got the same academic rigor. But I think that the top students at any school do have the academic rigor. I want to mention Ponce IB. Now, honestly, I haven't been back to Ponce since I attended there, but one of my good friends is the activities director at Gables High, and she's excellent. And my wife is the Best Buddies sponsor, and she's has a great club. Anyway, if you ever land at Gables High, reach back out to me, please. But she's got a friend at Ponce that runs the IB program, and it's just like, go check it out for yourself, because she swears to me that that's a good program. That if you're going to send your child to Ponce, try to get them in the IB program, and then it's that there's big fish in small pond issues at some of these schools. Do you want to be a big fish in a small pond, or do you want to be a small pond, a small fish in a big pond? And so, I went to Harvard, but just to visit, and then I left after a few hours. But um, I did not attend or take any classes at Harvard. If I had, I would have felt extremely inadequate. The college that I did go to was challenging enough for me, and so that wouldn't have been the right school for me. I didn't apply, and I wouldn't have gotten in. But the point is, my son was never mentioned for an award ever at Ransom in his 3 years at the middle school. In his ninth grade year, he won Freshman of the Year at Gables. So his confidence, which is very important for all of us, especially young people, his confidence is now like a totally different level, and he's sort of like a different student and a different guy now that he's like an award-winning guy. So I think you guys need to consider that with your families. And so just having them at the most challenging school might be the right thing for your family. Maybe you don't want to invest all of their time into schoolwork because you don't think it's the most important thing for them right now, that they can find other things to fill up their time. I'm sure you can. Okay. Did I answer that question? What other schools do you want to talk about? We talked about Riviera, Ransom, Carrollton, Gulliver, Palmer Trinity, Ponce, Carver. Yeah. What else? So Berlin, I have not visited. I mean, I've been on their campus to coach football against them when I was a Ransom coach, and so obviously, the girls shouldn't apply because it's all boys' school. Of course, if you don't know this, then Berlin was an institution in Cuba before the revolution, and they have done very well here. It's pretty far west, and there's different levels of religiousness at different schools. So Palmer Trinity has a chapel. They're Episcopalian. They're not that I would say religion light. I would not say that they're ramming down the religion down your throat. Now, maybe you want a lot of religion at your school. I think Berlin has is a little higher in terms of the religion, and so that might be a good thing for your family, especially if they're Catholic. And then I would say that Carrollton's sort of between there. They've got a lot of religion, but it's not maybe as much as Berlin. But that's why Carrollton wants to do a boys' school in the Grove at that other location across from Kennedy Park, because there's no schools over here in the East for boys Catholic schools. So yeah, Berlin has got a good reputation for sports and religion, and obviously their top students are still top students. But I have not visited Berlin, so I cannot. I have sent some families there through these different tests, and they're very happy there. So I would talk to Berlin parents about Berlin. That's my best advice. What other schools can I talk to you guys about? I want you guys to be able to take a. I know some people are leaving because they have to go, and so we've reached about an hour. This is how to reach me. Um, that's my phone number. You can take a screenshot of that or write it down. I think I've got some emails that I'm going to send out a little bit later today of these presentations if you want them. But guys, thank you so much for your attention and your questions, and I'll just stay on and answer any individual questions. But if you need help with anything academic, I probably can help you, or I have someone that can help you. I don't want to eat up any more of your time, but I'll just stay on and answer any questions if you want to linger. And then, Carla, hopefully this was helpful for your group, and I'm happy to come do it again. And also in the spring, I'm happy to give you guys more of a how you should organize your children for middle school, and what organizational skills and study skills they should develop in order to have success at the middle school level. And maybe we can involve the kids in that. That would be fun, and teach them a few tricks, right? Whether they listen to those or not, maybe they won't, but some of them might. Okay. And so this is how to get a hold of me, guys. And there's a email and a couple phone numbers and a website. Yeah. Oh yeah. You're very welcome. Yeah. No problem. Yes. No problem. No problem. Thank you so much. It's great to get a chance to talk to the parents from Sunset. Okay. Yeah. And you guys can sign off or just stay on if you do have any questions, and I'll just hang out for a minute. Yes. No, no, I have people. I don't tutor chemistry because I would need tutoring for chemistry, and I don't tutor physics. But I have excellent people that do these things for me, or for your Sean. So no, almost any subject. There's a few. I have a Mandarin tutor, but I have someone for almost every subject. Maybe not every foreign language, but almost anything that you need help for, I've got. Where does she go to school? She goes to Carver. I mean, maybe bringing in a math tutor can really help her because there might be some things that she wasn't paying attention to on Zoom that are like underpinnings of her understanding. And then once she gets that, like, I don't know, if you weren't paying attention on the right day, you could miss out on a lot of stuff. So it could be a content, or it could just be like, well, math is a tough subject sometimes, and they're teaching one new concept a day, so several a week, and so it's always shifting. And so there, it sounds like there might be a motivational issue, but more than likely, it's there's also an understanding issue. And so the kids, the students that really like math are the ones that are good at it, and we tend to like things that we're good at. And so once we start to slip, oh, I'm not getting as good at grades, I'm not understanding it as well, then I don't like it. And so now I'm not going to pay attention to it, which sort of makes the problem worse. So I definitely think bringing a tutor might really assist your daughter. So I'm happy to talk to you about that. Did you take down text me your name, and we'll talk about it later. And I've got someone that can help her. Okay, but any almost anything that you have academic trouble with, or a situation you want to talk about too. We can also talk about things, not just admissions. So, though I do a lot of admissions testing myself as my own tutoring, but then I train other tutors how to do that test, and then they know how to do their own thing like chemistry and physics. I don't know how to do. I mean, it was not good. It wasn't good for the world. It wasn't good for a sixth grader or a seventh grader or a college kid or a senior or a freshman. Or it was just not good for teachers. It wasn't ideal because we were really unprepared for it, and everything was just haphazard and rolled out pretty poorly, I thought. Absolutely, which we really need to be careful about. Um, you know, I don't know. Of course. Oh, right. Well, that's what college is like. That I was even in my dad's law school class years ago, and people checking their email or Facebook, while taking my dad's law school class. So the temptations are there. When they go to college, they're going to be able to have a laptop, probably when they go to high school, and so it's tough. Yeah, and it's like Pandora's box. I mean, you can't like put the genie back in the bottle, can you? It's hard. It's really hard. But that, yeah, we can help her. Um, thank you, thank you. Yes, Vicky, please. Well, um, what I think that Gulliver, in terms of the private schools, Gulliver is the one that's best equipped for the learning any child with learning disabilities, because they have that other campus, which I have not attended. I have not. I've heard a lot about, but I have not physically gone there because I had to stop visiting schools for a year and a half. Called the Montgomery campus near Palmetto, right? And then in high school, it's called the Miller Drive campus, which is across from Tropical Park. So they have two separate campuses, but they don't stay there the whole day. They do their core classes there. Then they go to lunch and their electives with the regular kids. So I don't know if there's much knowledge or um, recognition by the other kids that, hey, you go to that campus. Obviously, the kids that see each other at that campus know, but the other kids might not even pay attention to it. Or there might not be as much stigma, but kids these days, they're basically getting the academic support that they need. And just because you're at that campus one year doesn't mean you're there at every year necessarily. Okay. Well, so how much does she read? What's your daughter's name? Penelope. And how much does she read in English? Does she read on her own? But does she read every night? Is there a requirement in your house that she's got to read? And does she enjoy reading? Good. Good. So keep her passionate about reading. Now, you can look into Gulliver for fourth grade, for fifth grade. You don't need to wait till sixth grade because they do have K through 12, pre K through 12. So you could go visit that now. Now, that doesn't mean you switch her out of Sunset if you think Sunset's meeting her needs. But if she keeps reading, remember, she's a little bit behind in the English language, but she's way ahead in French and German. Well, there's a lot of reasons that that's wonderful. So I would just keep talking to her in French and German and even get her to read some French and German, but then also a lot of reading in English because all of her school works in English. Well, not all of it, but let's see. What does she take a specialty language at Sunset in the German program? So have her read in German, have her read in English the most, because that's if she ever has to take one of these standardized tests, it's going to be in English. Now, German can help you with English, and certainly French can help you with English in terms of the Latin roots. But I would just say, um, I would say, have her just keep loving reading, but then also, I mean, if what grades is she getting on her AR test? No, I'm saying, but is she getting 90 or 100%? What her reading comprehension is fine then. Those are reading comprehension tests. Well, there's another tool called AR that you use, and we have evidence that when she's interested in a book, she understands it. I don't think I've ever met a child that loves iReady. There's some kids that love AR because you get to read the right. So when she's interested, she gets a good score. When she's not interested, she bombs it. All right. So her reading comprehension is fine. I mean, no one likes AR iReady because it's not fun, right? I mean, AR is not fun, but it's short and it's sort of painless. You get to read a big book and only answer 10 questions about it. Right. So she likes reading and she does it well when she's interested. That's fine. She reads fine, I bet. I mean, if you want to give her a better effort, then just give her other incentives to do better on iReady. But kids are not excited about iReady because it's not fun. It's more important that she reads what she's interested in reading. Okay. And keep speaking French and German to her. Don't let your guard down because you will regret it if you do. Perfect. Good. Excellent. That'll be great. She'll be, and then take her to France and Germany and French and German speaking countries. Okay. You're welcome. Diego, you still there? Roberto, Teresa? Do you have any questions? Okay. Yasmin, are you there? Do you want to ask any questions? Please. So again, almost every school is going to now have a robotics and a coding, and especially I know Ransom does, I know Gulliver does, and I've been impressed by those programs. I would just ask the schools once you get there about their, do they have a math club? Do they have a robotics? Do they have coding into the curriculum? These are three questions I think would be good for you to ask about each campus that you're. I don't know if Carver does. Because I haven't visited Carver. Well, I just went in their office, but I did not like get a school tour and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Math club, robotics, and then do they ever put the coding into the curriculum? So I know that Ransom has like a semester, I think it's in seventh grade, where they've got to take computers, but there's robotics and coding a little bit into that. And then, so there, I mean, that's one semester. It's not really into the curriculum, but it is because at least some point in your middle school career, you get exposure to coding. Um, but there's also all sorts of programs that he could be doing on his own to scratch that itch, right? And so, what I forgot to talk about is mass, and I forgot to talk about West Lab. Oh, okay. So yes, having a math club means that he's going to find other kids that are interested in math, and they can push each other and challenge each other to like do all these crazy equations and solutions and talk about math. And then certainly at the high school level, do they have an engineering program? Do they have an engineering class, or not program, but do they have an engineering class that they can take? Yeah, because obviously, what are you going to do with math besides teach it or tutor it? Engineering or architecture or science or something. Yeah, and so everyone's high on STEM and says that they've got. I mean, Ransom's got a new STEM building. I've not been inside it. It's beautiful, I know, but they're all going to say that they're pushing for STEM, but how integrated is are those concepts into the curriculum is one question I would ask. Okay. What is Carver offering? Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Teresa, Teresita, you're welcome. Good morning. No problem. Okay. Good. Okay. Uh-huh. Well, there are some magnets that have for medicine. Obviously, in most science departments, you can take an anatomy class, and obviously, you can take biology, and sometimes you can take microbiology. So that and chemistry is also medicine. By the time your fifth grader is in medical school, let's just pretend she goes through college and gets into medical school. Knowing about that computing and stuff might not be the worst thing, but I don't know if there's some medical middle school, not that I know, not that I know of, not that I know of. And where the high schools are, I would have to do research on that too, because there might be a program at this school or that school, but I'm not aware of where the programs are for that. So we have some time before high school, but it's great that she has that interest. But like the doctors of today are just the best students, because if you make A's, then you can get into medical school. And if you make B's, you can't get into medical school. So you have to be an excellent reader. You have to be an excellent test taker. You have to be excellent in math. But just having the interest in medicine is not enough. You have to love studying, or else you can't become a doctor. So one of my tutors is a med student at UM, and so he also trains people how to study. But he you have to be a great student, and you have to love studying, and you have to sort of love student debt. No, not love student debt, but you have to be willing to take on that student debt, unless your parents are paying all the way through medical school, which is almost impossible. I mean, it's a lot, and then you got to go make some money to pay off that debt. So there's a lot of other ways to get involved in medicine besides being a doctor. Um, but I don't know of any program that is medically inclined, especially for middle school or high school. So I would have to do research on that, as should you. But taking anatomy and studying on your own, I don't know what a middle schooler could do to study for medicine today, but it's certainly an important field. You're welcome. So West Lab is super hard to get into for K through 6, but I think maybe sixth, seventh, and eighth might be easier. They might have a lot of kids dropping out. It's sort of small, but those K through 8s I worry about a little bit, because that is it truly a middle school, or is it mainly an elementary school? Like when you've got 6 grades here and you got 3 grades here, which one's going to get the priority? But I do know some families that I trust, and they're good parents, and they have their kids at West Lab Middle. I'm tutoring a young lady this afternoon to switch to. She wants to go to LaSalle from West Lab 8th grade. So I'm going to tutor her in the test that they require. But I know the PE coach there. I mean, it's a good school, West Lab. Mast is obviously a great school. The thing I worry about West Lab is just being such a small middle school. That's you know, it's not its own middle school. So if that matters to you, and then Mast is got middle school and high school. It's got a lot of kids from Key Biscayne, obviously, and there's 2 separate programs. So it's much easier if you live in Key Biscayne to get in there. And there's I forget which program is which, but the program that the kids automatically get into from Key Biscayne is the weaker one academically, and the one that you have to apply to get into. But that might start in high school. I'm not sure if it starts in sixth or ninth grade, but I do think there's a middle school component and a high school component for both. And of course, they're on Virginia Key, and they utilize marine science and their location on the water to some degree to spice up their science classes and stuff. So that's sort of cool and unique location for a school, and they have a great reputation. But there's two programs, and the one that the Key kids are in is weaker from what I've heard. But I've not visited the school. But some of my best friends have their kids at the high school. Okay, yeah, but it's definitely has a good reputation. So the IB program stands for international. The IB program stands for International Baccalaureate, and so there's some recognition, especially if you were going to send your child to college outside of the United States. That might be more important, but it's just a higher standard, and they sort of study the same things, and they get like really good teachers, and they're doing challenging, rigorous work in the IB program. So it's almost like saying honors. It's almost like saying honors, and then other people from around the country are going to be like, oh, IB, yeah, I was in IB too. And so there's this, I don't know if it's a fraternity, but it's this group of people that recognize the academic rigor. I think is mainly what it's about. Okay. All right, let me show it to you again, and you can take a screenshot or a picture of it. Okay, I think it's on the screen now. Um, okay, well, great to talk to you. Yes, no problem. Oh, good. I'm glad it was. Okay, bye. Yasmin, are you still there? Okay, terrific. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much. Just let me know if you have any questions. Okay. Have a great day.